Our name is Jonathan Meades, and this series is called Abroad Again. It lifts the stones of British buildings to reveal the life forms beneath them. Follow us down a B-road of discovery, down life's lonely highway of adventure. So, Abroad Again, for a map of the future and of tomorrow's tomorrow.
May the 29th, 1985, evening, Palavas-les-Flots. I was looking for a bar with a telly. When I found one, it was silent. Où en est le match? What's the score, I asked. The bloodshot psychopathic barman glared at me. Une trentaine de morts. Jusqu'ici. About 30 dead. So far. What? Then I realized the match hadn't kicked off. Une trentaine de morts. Tués. 30 people dead. Killed. English? This could turn nasty. The house Alsatian had its owner's eyes. It spread across the floor like a crocodile.
Non, suis écossais.
The half-truth of my life.
A punter at the bar suggested that just because I was Scottish, I wasn't responsible for what was happening at Heysel Stadium. I agreed gratefully, and I pointed out that Liverpool was no more representative of Britain than Marseille, then the race-hate capital of Europe, was representative of France.
But they're doing something about Marseille. What are they doing about Liverpool? They had the Garden Festival. This was, unastonishingly, met with incredulity. The Liverpool Garden Festival? Football apart, Liverpool in the early 80s was notable for strikes, militant riots, and the loss of 20% of available jobs and 10% of its population. Here was a city that was a basket case, a city looking for a cure.
He's so fine. Wish she were mine.
Michael Heseltine, Secretary of State for the Environment, swung into action.
The decades of decay are over. On 250 acres in the heart of Liverpool, we are building the finest urban, industrial, housing and recreational project in this country. It wasn't an accident.
Heseltine had the bright idea of solving all of Liverpool's ills with a 5-month pageant of horticultural excellence and spectacular entertainment. His bright idea was not his own. It was over 30 years old. The earliest Bundesgartenschauen was staged in West Germany soon after the Second World War.
Aus dem Opelwerk in Rüsselsheim kommt auch Ihr neuer Kühlschrank.
Mein Frigidaire.
These were the years of the German economic miracle, when that vanquished country triumphantly entered the golden age of white goods.
Geh mir rein. Ich bin ja so stolz auf meinen Frigidaire.
Heseltine put 2 and 2 together. Planting flowers would occasion the Scouse economic miracle. The change in West Germany's fortunes had hitherto been ascribed to fiscal reform, curtailing the money supply and exercising wage and price controls. Hydrangeas in bloom would evidently achieve so much more.
think that after the festival is gone, there will be very considerable numbers of houses built here, very large numbers of jobs attracted on the industrial sites here, but I think a very large number...
3.5 million people visited the Liverpool Garden Festival in 1984. Yet, astonishingly, unemployment remained high, per capita income remained low. The Garden Festival was, however, massively influential in other ways. It proved to be the foundation of a new industry, or rather, an industry which presented itself as new, the Regeneration Industry.
Dudwich is regenerating. The global regenerative community is transforming our town. Potentializing its potential. World-famous architect Frank Gehry has been invited to bring his Bilbao vision to Dudwich. His museum of bingo balls and Centre for Numerical Leisure will regenerate the area where the bingo ball factory once stood. Incentivizing incentive. It's an opportunity gateway. Water-spanning solutionist Santiago Calatrava will transform Dudwich's canal quarter into the Venice of the West Midlands. Trailblazing connectivity. It's an energy pathway. Architects, town planners, urban developers have spoken. Dudwich is regenerating.
I'm regenerating.
I'm regenerating. I'm regenerating. Are you?
No one had previously ever heard of regeneration in the sense that it is used today. It's inescapable. What is it?
A job creation scheme.
Urban renewal by oblique means? Spin made stone. Rather, spin made glass, steel and titanium.
Finger in the dike of post-industrial despair. Volume building in disguise. Comprehensive redevelopment, reincarnated and given a name with spiritual connotations.
A sprat to catch a multinational. Gentrification with new build. The most telling expression of new labour.
It's all these and more. It's the greatest of contemporary gravy trains. It's a bandwagon. The bandwagon has been rebranded. The bandwagon is now a brandwagon. Rebranding is a euphemism for euphemism. Call this a hallmark diversifier, and it becomes something entirely different.
As early as 1988, the National Audit Office recommended that the Merseyside Development Corporation be wound up, due to its having spent hundreds of millions to little effect.
How such effect is measured is the holiest mystery of the regeneration cult.
Cost-benefit analysis is, at best, an imprecise pseudoscience. And when applied to regeneration, the National Audit Office was impotent against what is essentially a faith. So, regional development agencies multiplied. This expansion shows that in regeneration, results, whatever they might be, count for little, beside flashy initiatives, loud gestures, and the guile to procure public money in the first place.
Regeneration is subject to crazes. And again, in the late 80s and early 90s, it was Liverpool that gestated the Aloes. After the Garden Festival came the renovation of its dock buildings, which are unsurpassed in Britain. They're the work of Jesse Hartley, who was not an architect but an engineer.
They are now overpriced apartments and shops selling useless knickknacks. But these awesome structures are also visible reminders of what once was and now isn't. A city's greatness.
Their restoration was reckoned to be a step towards bringing new hope to the city, through presumably the blur of association. But restoration is not some magic panacea that allows us to exhume the past and repeat old glories. Nonetheless, we can still pretend.
The buildings must be found a role. After all, the post-Protestant conscience will not allow architectural marvels to be preserved for sublimity's sake. They must be preserved for a social purpose, for community. And we all know that community is sacred, like low emission diversity and vibrant sustainability. A museum devoted to an industry that no longer exists, situated in a building rendered redundant by that very non-existence. This was certainly a quaint way of looking to the future.
Still, this charade of an approximate past and a collectively false memory did have the effect of safeguarding buildings whose continued existence had by no means been assured. Now, the regeneration community grew and grew. Just as individuals become dependent on handouts, so do places. Liverpool is generously funded because it has a tradition of being generously funded. It breeds want.
These are a few of the agencies which require support. Merseyside.
Network.
Merseyside.
Construction Initiative.
Merseyside.
The Alliance.
Merseyside.
Acme.
Merseyside.
Partnership.
Merseyside.
Pathways.
Till the mid-1990s, their work was predominantly reactive. But worthy refurbishment smacked merely of patching up an exhausted fabric, not of invigorating proactivity, not of modernizing.
Contemporary photographs of Nazi Germany's Autobahnen show them deserted, and so they were. Few folk had a car to drive on them. Of course, they were of future military significance, but more importantly, these road-building projects put people to work. (1997) was the year of New Labour's Machtergreifung. Here was a regime that, like a tin pot dictatorship, believed in state subsidies for athletes and in building to its own glory. When the names
Eccleston, Kaplan, Chipolata, Campbell, Mandelson, Prescott, Mills, Induja
are no longer recognized, and his criminal folly in Iraq is forgotten among the host of preliminary skirmishes in the 21st century's struggle between civilization and barbarism. Blair's age, the age of social Thatcherism, will be recalled as much by its architecture as by its low dishonesty.
There can be no doubt about what type of building will come to be regarded is almost parodically representative of this age. A new type of structure, characterized by its hollow vacuity, by its sculptural sensationalism, by its happy quasi-modernism, and by its lack of actual utility.
Yet it possesses two definite purposes: to be instantly and arrestingly memorable,
Thank you.
to be extraordinarily camera-friendly.
This type of structure is a sound bite's visual analog, a sight bite.
The sight bite may be an instrument of that fetish of new labour, modernisation. The sight bite may appear modern, but it's pastiche modern, synthetic modern.
It's the antithesis of modernism, one of whose shibboleths was that form should follow function. Now, in the case of synthetic modernism, form doesn't precede function, rather form is the function. This is transgressive modernism. It's ornamental modernism.
(1997). The notion of a building as a three-dimensional logo was born the same year as New Labour's Marktgreifel. Wrong. The notion of a building as a three-dimensional logo, that's to say, as the sign of a creed or the symbol of an ideology or superstition, predates 1997 by many thousands of years. It probably predates the notion of a building as shelter. For instance, the Catholic Church sought to impress humble punters with Baroque extravagance. God's house was the house of a very rich man.
Yes, the floor does slope. It helps the client to experience the holistic presence of God's mission initiative.
Like Liverpool, Bilbao was the near corpse of an industrial city with special needs. Rusting plant, abandoned mills, defunct furnaces, empty docks, high unemployment, declining population.
Unlike Liverpool, it was actively separatist and violently nationalist. It was, perhaps still is, the heartland of ETA, Euskadi ta Askatatuna, Basque land for the Basque people. This great organization of theirs was twinned with the INLA. They're very similar, but they do have differences. ETA has always favored the olive balaclava, which is moodier, groovier, and perhaps lends a certain grace to terrorism.
Of course, your murderous terrorism is my glorious struggle for independence. Neither, however, does much to attract inward investment or tourism. The Basque country is linguistically unique. Its sports are hayalai, tree chopping, grass cutting. It invented Jacare and the Society of Jesus.
Bilbao has always looked out from the Iberian Peninsula and away from its Castilian-dominated hinterland. Athletic Bilbao wears the colours of Sunderland and employs only Basque players. It was the most successful team in the Spanish League in the early 80s when Andoni Goicoechea, known as the Butcher, was playing. But, as Liverpool's much greater contemporary success showed, football does absolutely nothing for a city's economy.
TV viewing figures would suggest that only 5% of the population is interested in football. What is populist is not popular. The Basque Country is almost willfully eccentric.
You eat elvers with pimenton and garlic, hake cheek and salt cod peel peel, both of which are wonderfully gelatinous, salt cod fritters, apple fritters, sea urchins, street urchins, brains in batter, cerebral medulla, calf muzzle, bull's balls, two sorts of horse, the Haka Navarra and the baguette, which are bred specifically for the table, goose barnacles, tripe with peppers, black pudding, white pudding, grilled beef ribs, 40 sorts of ham, 60 sorts of cheese, the most succulent chorizo imaginable, bream cider, baked kid, braised boar. This country is gastronomically, linguistically and culturally insular, hence its proud nationalism. In large nations, nationalism is always dangerous. In small nations, nationalism is always proud. In small nations, chauvinism, too, is permissible, apparently.
Yet, the Guggenheim Museum, Bilbao's device for putting itself on the map, was designed by a man who, because he is Canadian, would not be allowed to represent Athletic Bilbao. He doesn't speak the language, or play high-alai, or bomb Madrid government offices. Further, Frank Gehry's building makes no concession to where it is. It looks as though it has been dropped on Bilbao. The Guggenheim is the world's most importunate building of the recent past.
It screams deafeningly, "Take my picture, take my picture," adding sotto, "but mind where you take it from the sanctioned side." Like an ancient starlet, it has a good side.
And it has to be lit just so. It bellows, "Look at me!" But what are we looking at? Apart from Australian titanium, counterintuitive angles, anti-geometry, and supposed allusions to hulks, to shipbuilding, to whales.
Are we looking at an item of American cultural expansionism, for which the Basque government paid $100 million, much of it provided by the EU, the promoter of regional autonomy? Are we looking at a monument to Frank Gehry's limitless self-regard?
What we are certainly not looking at is a museum of the first, second, third, or even fourth class, or even fifth, sixth, seventh. But then the exhibits are entirely irrelevant.
10. The building is a success. It's an XXXXL lump of sculpture. What happens inside it is of no moment. Could have been an abattoir. It could have been a call centre. It makes no difference what it purports to be. Its job is to be seen all over the world. Gehry has designed an advertisement, a perpetual marketing campaign. If architecture is frozen music, Gehry is easy listening for those who despise easy listening. Talking Heads and titanium. What Bilbao has shown is that the word regeneration has to be made flesh, so to speak, has to be figuratively represented. A new faith requires material expression. Bilbao has also shown that regeneration breeds regeneration. The Guggenheim was dropped on Bilbao. It could have been dropped on anywhere. Indeed, its many imitators have been dropped on anywhere, on everywhere, with indiscriminate enthusiasm. Geary's scheme proved inspirational as soon as it was published, let alone built. We should not be surprised. Architects are zealous hunter-gatherers of inspiration. In any era, there exist a few exemplars, each of whom attracts an army of acolytes, or, to use the technical term, plagiarists. Regenerative cities replicate each other's buildings, which is hardly surprising, for they all commission iconic blue-chip trackers from members of a small cadre of perpetually jet-lagged architects. These are the architects who are relentlessly copied, the ones who set down the templates for our New Age's monuments. But monuments to what?
To non-orthogonal geometry, to spatial delinquency, to magnifications of early 1960s product design. Remember the lighter shaped like a pebble? To the infinite capacities of software, to zoomorphic and geomorphic whimsy, to a willful unorthodoxy, which has of course rapidly become the new orthodoxy.
Virtually indistinguishable buildings occur on every continent. Every building that is ever made has the potential to be a one-off, but that opportunity is constantly missed. The bespoke is being globalized.
Not only architecture, but the entire apparatus of regeneration is slavish in its adherence to fashion. It's signally ingrown, a smooth-talking verruca.
Why should a strategy dreamed up for a Basque city be considered appropriate for the northwest of England? The assumption that every post-industrial city is akin to every other post-industrial city is wrong-headed and insulting. It omits all that is specific to a place. The strategy was replicated long before anyone had had the opportunity to assess the benefits to Bilbao of the Guggenheim. The cause was on the drawing board. The effect was obviously entirely unknowable to the calibration community. This is evidence, as though any were needed, that what prompted development agencies to ape Bilbao was not the promise of an improvement in the quality of life, but the covetous desire for a flashy building or a flashy bridge by Santiago Calatrava. Certainly, Bilbao did get itself noticed, and 9 years after the Guggenheim was opened, ETA laid down its arms, which shows how efficacious it was. The Bilbao strategy is a 2 klex initiative throttle. First comes the sight bite, the three-dimensional logo, the challenging focus, the symbolic component, designed by a world-famous architect who's never seen the location. Next comes the decision about what function to suture on.
Some regeneration remedy creatives at work. These guru guys who coalface at the coalface of Armageddon decisions interstitize tough paradigms and vision inclusions in big thought canopies. They brainstorm, like they're firebombing Dresden. They go into deep spine submersion. Then they announce that the site bite will contain a museum and gallery and cultural logarithm with conference facilities for the regenerative community.
This is because the next stage of the initiative throttle is the proposition that a museum and gallery with cultural logarithm and conference facilities for the regenerative community is a catalyst for economic growth and social progress. Why? A silly question. Because culture is good. Not old-style culture, not Mozart, Beethoven, Joyce, Shakespeare, Goya, Van der Weyden. Old-style culture was not inclusive. Therefore, it was elitist. Therefore, it was bad. But the new, accessibly accessible, fun-style, fun arts, they beacon integrated modernizing lighthouse revitalization for everyone. Vaulting awareness gateways. It doesn't matter whether you're so old, you're old Alzheimer himself. It doesn't matter whether you're so young, you're in utero. Culture will springboard you into the happiness sector.
Of course, the arts, a creation of artless committees for public purposes, are not art. The arts are generalized. Art is particular. This is art.
This is Sir Thomas Aston at the deathbed of his wife by John Souch, a predominantly heraldic painter who spent his entire career in the Northwest in and around Chester. Every museum or gallery needs a painting such as this, something which speaks to the small of the back. The problem is there aren't enough of them to go round.
Museums have to be filled, or had to be. They're vessels, or were. The Guggenheim Bilbao has almost pioneered the Museum of Nothing. Now there's an idea. The supply of vessels is outstripping that of the kit to stuff them with. It has to be spread thinly, and will be till there's acceptance of the Museum of Heritage, narrativizing the spectrum of heritage museums since heritage was invented in 1985. Or the Museum of Toxic Waste, but we've already had that. The Millennium Dome, a routinely neo-modern building filled with Mandelson-sanctioned trash and the pervasive reek of McDonald's. The proposition that art, museums, galleries, theatres, public sculptures and so on might be socially, morally and economically useful is, in other words, nothing more than a belief, a hope. which can of course be dressed up to give it substance by the application of a delightfully bogus science called output measurement metrics.
This hall of statistical mirrors and reflective mendacity allows development agencies to spend public money as they wish. Yes, the floor does slope. It enables the client to experience the disorientation of war. And it draws attention to the main exhibit, the architect's imagination. Daniel Libeskind is really what's on show here. He is evidently a far greater artist than Nevinson or Wyndham Lewis, and has persistently to remind us of the fact.
This is one of the best museums I've ever visited.
Congratulations on a truly wonderful museum. I'd recommend a visit without hesitation.
Building in a dramatic location, filming.
It's fascinating and very heart-rending. Building. All in all, Liebeskind's Imperial War Museum North
designed to help you reflect rather than
fill your mind with.
Everyone should come and see this.
As I was saying, it enables development agencies to claim that what is politically opportune possesses economically rational bases. So, culturally diverse handshake sheds, multi-faith street furniture, creative hub clusters, vibrant cycle paths, inclusive flagshipping lanes, participation footfalls, therapeutic tram shelters, holistic pudding churches. These are all somehow reckoned to be triggers of enterprise.
Will these oblique forms of intervention really prove more effective than the provision of, say, shelter to those who cannot afford the affordable, health care for the needy, subsidised jobs, effective public transport, such as, say, ultra-speed, which would cut the journey time between London and Manchester to 40 minutes? What has happened to Greater Manchester since it got two cultural site bites within a few minutes' walk of each other?
What are the wider social benefits of the Imperial War Museum in the north and the Lowry Gallery? Because of inclusive culture, curvy buildings and reinvigorated docks, Moss Side's crack dens have turned into holistic dance workshops. There are no longer drive-by shootings in Hulme. The underage rent community no longer hawks its brawn at Victoria Station. Most members are now reading for degrees in development partnership studies. The many graduates of Tirana's legendary Polytechnic of Pimping and People Smuggling who plied their trade here are all retraining as urban energizers.
And I'm Napoleon. Although tomorrow I'll be Keith Harrison Orville.
Manchester may have been rebranded as a knowledge capital, whatever that means. Yet the city is obliged to run a crime and disorder reduction partnership, managed by an executive partnership group whose work is carried out by the Crime and Disorder Team, the Manchester Multi-Agency Gang Strategy, the Youth Offending Team, the Drugs and Alcohol Strategy Team.
And it still has the highest crime rate of any conurbation in the UK. Maybe that's what having two Premiership football teams does for a city.
Maybe cultural determinism isn't working. Could it be that it's as goofily optimistic as the architectural determinism of the welfare state? A sort of nationalised noblesse oblige which combined good intentions with a belief that better housing would create better people.
The presumption that humankind is improvable, let alone perfectible, by material means is as laughable as that which prescribes doses of participatory street theatre and mime laboratories. There has always existed an interestingly large minority whose instinct for self-preservation is so unevolved that it will trash its dwelling and piss in the lift.
It's a fact of life that the self-made get out of where they come from. Once upon a time in England, though not so much in Scotland, it was to the outer suburbs and satellites. In Manchester's case, Hale, Alderley Edge, Knutsford.
Today, it's to shiny apartments and kooky houses. It's mandatory to describe the old outer suburbs as leafy. It's equally mandatory not to describe these places as suburbs at all. Remember, euphemism, literally speaking happily, is a glass-box trucker of regeneration. These places are housing market renewal pathfinders. Housing market renewal pathfinders. Housing market renewal pathfinders.
They're suburbs.
Housing market renewal pathfinders.
The 21st century suburbs, the brownfield suburbs. They're the most significant achievement of the regeneration lark. The ideal English home throughout the 20th century derived, at many removes, from the bucolic cottage. Today, if you've just love-freighted 100 weight of speciality goods from Morocco or Colombia, you head for a lifestyle solution that is exclusivitized by representatives of the security community and by representatives of the guard dog community. Even if you're not in the import business, your expectations in this challenging new millennium are liable to be different to those of your parents and grandparents. The aspirational synthetic modern apartment is the cadmium coaxial of the souffle economy, on which someone will one day open the oven door. It is a product of design culture. It draws on bar culture, restaurant culture, retail culture, gallery culture, museum culture, culture. It is designed by an architect. It is built by an urban regenerator. There is no longer such a thing as a builder's bum. It is an urban regenerator's bum which sports hirsute cleavage with optional blackheads. For builders to call themselves regenerators is merely a laughable fib. It's the urban bit which is questionable. These places may be within cities rather than on their peripheries, but they don't belong to those cities. They're not integrated. They don't fill the space left by industrial plant. They are alien growths within the body rather than on its skin. And they completely overturn a century's association of topography with wealth. Those who could afford to do so used to flee the inner cities. These new burbs are a sign of a momentous demographic shift. The more we work in isolation from home, the more we will crave cities as sites for interaction and pleasure. The electronic cottage will not come to pass. The electronic loft is more like it. Since the Industrial Revolution, inner city has, but only in the USA and England, been shorthand for poverty, neglect of children, racial strife, sexually transmitted diseases, fencing stolen hubcaps, illiteracy, used needles, and losers. Poverty was to be found in inner cities, wealth in outer suburbs. Cultural regeneration has turned all that round. Within a few decades, inner city Britain will come to resemble inner city Europe. In Manchester, we can glimpse the future. What, though, will happen to the outer cities? Again, we'll follow the European model. This is suburban Liverpool. The oblique processes begun by Michael Heseltine will indeed achieve the regeneration of inner cities. The epithet inner city will cease to be used as shorthand for social woes. But poverty, drug addiction, racial strife and so on will not go away. The desperate and the dispossessed will always be with us. They will merely move to the outer burbs, victims of an economically enforced migration. This is what adherence to the European model means. No riots within the ring road.
Later tonight, 2 problem dogs are given a second chance. Natural World at 9. Coming next on BBC 2, Coast.